the mirror of doubt. Close your eyes, or simply let your mind drift as you listen. Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror. Not just any mirror. This one doesn't reflect your face, it reflects your beliefs. Every assumption you carry about yourself, the world, and reality itself is shimmering back at you in silver light. Now imagine that mirror begins to change. The reflection flickers. At first, it's subtle, a small shift in your expression, a slight distortion in the room behind you. But then it becomes more noticeable. Your reflection starts saying things you don't believe. It tells you that the sky isn't blue, that time doesn't exist, that love is just chemistry, or that none of this is real. And here's the most unsettling part. You can't tell if the mirror is lying or if you are. This is the beginning of doubt, not the kind that nags at you before an exam or lingers after a bad decision, but the deep, existential kind, the kind that questions everything you know, everything you feel, even the act of knowing and feeling itself. Welcome to the mirror of doubt. Let's begin our journey not by finding answers, but by asking the right questions. Because sometimes the only thing we can truly know is that we don't know anything at all. To understand where this idea comes from, we have to travel back in time, back to the 17th century, to a man named René Descartes. Descartes was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist who lived during a time when the world was shifting from superstition toward reason. He was deeply troubled by how much people believed without question, how easily perception could deceive, how memory could twist, how authority could manipulate truth. So he decided to do something radical. He decided to doubt everything. He didn't just doubt opinions or rumors, he doubted the senses themselves. He questioned whether the world around him was real, whether other people were real, whether his own body was real. Even dreams became suspect. After all, while dreaming, we often believe we are fully awake. So what proof did he have that he wasn't still dreaming now? What if the entire world was nothing more than an elaborate illusion, a dream that never ends? It sounds absurd, yes, but Descartes took it seriously. He doubted so thoroughly that he stripped away every belief, every assumption, until only one thing remained, the act of doubting itself. And from that came his famous declaration, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. You see, no matter how far you go into doubt, there is always one undeniable fact. You are thinking. And if you are thinking, then you must exist. That single realization became the foundation of modern philosophy, not because it gave us certainty about the world, but because it showed us that certainty might be impossible, and yet existence remains. So Descartes built his philosophy on that fragile thread, the awareness of self. Everything else, your memories, your senses, your past, could be illusions. But the fact that you are aware of those illusions cannot be doubted. Think of it like walking through thick fog. Every step forward feels uncertain. You can't see where you've been, and you can't tell where you're going. But the act of walking, the movement, the effort, the awareness, is undeniable. In that fog, the only truth is the act of moving through it. And so, we begin our journey not with facts, but with uncertainty, with the idea that perhaps the only thing we can trust is the very process of questioning itself. Now let's sit with this idea for a moment. Let's really consider it. If the only thing we can know for sure is that we are thinking, then what does that say about everything else? Our senses, our sight, sound, touch, These are the tools we use to navigate the world, but they can be tricked. Optical illusions fool the eye. Phantom limb pain tricks the body. Dreams feel real while we're inside them. Even logic, which seems so solid, can be twisted. Consider paradoxes, statements that seem true yet contradict themselves. Like the classic example, this statement is false. Is it true? If it is, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. There's no escape from the loop. And if even logic can trap us in contradictions, then what hope do we have of ever grasping objective truth? This leads us to a haunting possibility. What if belief itself is an illusion? We believe in gravity. We believe in love. We believe in ourselves. But belief is not proof. It's a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the chaos. So what happens when we stop believing? What if the mirror shows us that belief is just another layer of fog? Consider this. Every religion, every ideology, every worldview, each is built on a set of assumptions. Some are passed down from generation to generation. Others are chosen, carefully constructed over years of experience. But what if none of them are true? What if we live our entire lives clinging to ideas that are ultimately meaningless, that vanish like mist when we try to grasp them? Does that mean life has no meaning? Or does it mean that meaning is something we create, not something we find? There's a strange freedom in doubt, because once you accept that nothing is certain, you're free to explore without fear. You're free to ask the questions that others are too afraid to ask. Like, what if consciousness is all there is? What if the universe exists only because someone is observing it? What if you are the only real person in this world, and everyone else is just a figment of your imagination? These aren't just philosophical exercises. They're invitations to look deeper, to challenge the foundations of your reality. And the more you look, the more you realize the world is not as solid as it seems. It's like standing at the edge of a vast ocean, watching the horizon. The water looks endless, the sky infinite. But beneath the surface, everything shifts. Currents pull in unseen directions. Creatures move in darkness. And above it all, the moon casts its silent gaze. Doubt is that tide, pulling at the edges of your understanding, revealing what lies beneath. As we step away from the mirror, one question lingers. If perception creates reality, then what happens when perception fails? What if the way we see the world isn't just limited, but completely wrong? What if we are living in a simulation? A world that looks real, feels real, acts real, but is nothing more than code running in a system we'll never see? That's where our next spiral begins. So take a breath, let the fog settle around you, and prepare to dive deeper into the unknown. The simulation hypothesis. Are we just code? Let's begin with something familiar. Imagine you're playing a video game. You control a character, maybe a warrior, a pilot, or an explorer. The world around them feels vast, complex, even alive. There are forests that sway in the wind, cities that hum with activity, stories unfolding in real time. Now imagine that character becomes aware. They start to ask questions. They notice patterns in their world. They realize they can't leave it, that everything seems too perfect, too consistent, as if someone else is watching, or worse, someone else is writing every line of code behind the scenes. And then comes the most unsettling realization. What if that character is you? Not literally, You sitting here reading these words, but the version of you that experiences this world, this life, this reality. What if your thoughts, your memories, your emotions are all just data flowing through circuits we'll never see? This is the heart of the simulation hypothesis, a theory that suggests our reality might not be real at all, that what we call life could be nothing more than an intricate program running inside a machine far beyond our comprehension. It sounds like science fiction, but when you peel back the layers, it starts to feel less like fantasy and more like possibility. To understand where this idea comes from, we need to meet a man named Nick Bostrom. He's a philosopher, not a programmer, not a scientist, but someone who asks questions so profound they ripple through entire fields of study. In 2003, he published a paper titled, "Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?" In it, he proposed a radical argument based on probability, technology, and human ambition. His core idea is simple. If future civilizations ever develop the ability to simulate entire realities with conscious beings inside them, then statistically speaking, we are almost certainly living in one right now. Because once that power exists, there would be no limit to how many simulations could be created. And if billions or trillions of simulated realities exist, each containing billions of people, then the odds that we are in the original base reality become incredibly small. Think of it like flipping a coin. If only one person flips it once, the chance of getting heads is 50%. But if a billion people flip coins a trillion times each, the number of heads will vastly outnumber the single toss. In this analogy, we're trying to guess whether we're the first coin toss or just another head among trillions. Bostrom breaks it down into three possibilities. Civilizations go extinct before reaching post-human stage. This means humanity may destroy itself before ever gaining the technology to run detailed simulations. War, environmental collapse, pandemics, any number of threats could prevent us from ever becoming advanced enough to create virtual realities. Posthumans choose not to run ancestor simulations. Maybe we do survive long enough to reach godlike technological power, but perhaps we decide not to simulate our ancestors. Maybe it's unethical. Maybe it's boring. Maybe we lose interest in the past entirely. We are almost certainly in a simulation. If neither of the above is true, if we survive and we do build simulations, then the number of simulated beings would vastly outnumber those in the real world, which means the chances that we are in the real world drop close to zero. So either we're going to die out soon, we'll avoid creating simulations, or we're already in one. That's the essence of the simulation argument. Not a proof, but a logical framework that forces us to confront the possibility that our reality isn't what it seems. And while Bostrom didn't claim to know which option is true, he pointed out that if the third one is correct, then the implications are staggering. Now let's try to imagine what it would mean to live in a simulation. Picture yourself walking outside. The sun shines, birds chirp, the breeze brushes against your skin. Everything feels solid, real, tangible. But what if none of it is? What if the sunlight is just lines of code rendering light effects? What if birds are algorithms following behavior trees? What if the air you breathe is just a sensory illusion programmed to make you feel immersed? It's easy to dismiss this as absurd until you remember how quickly technology has advanced in just a few decades. Think about how far we've come since the early days of gaming. From Pong to photorealistic open worlds with AI characters that react to your actions. From simple chatbots to language models that write essays, poems, and scripts indistinguishable from human work. If we keep advancing at this rate, it's not hard to imagine a point where simulations become indistinguishable from reality, even to the people inside them. Like fish in a tank who begin to suspect the glass isn't the edge of their world, we might be starting to glimpse the edges of ours. And the scariest part? If we are in a simulation, we might never know, because whoever built it could have made it so seamless, so flawless, that questioning its nature is part of the design. Maybe doubt itself is coded into us. Maybe curiosity is just another subroutine. Maybe even this very moment, the one you're experiencing now, is being watched or recorded or reset. Let's sit with this idea for a moment. If we truly are in a simulation, what does that mean for everything we believe? Does life still have meaning? At first glance, it might seem like it wouldn't. If we're just a data, if our choices are predetermined, if our emotions are programmed responses, then what's the point? But maybe meaning doesn't depend on being real. Maybe meaning comes from experience itself. After all, we cry during movies. We fall in love with fictional characters. We find beauty in paintings and songs that don't exist outside of ink and sound waves. So why couldn't we find meaning in a world that's simulated? Perhaps the question isn't whether life matters if it's artificial, but whether meaning itself is artificial. Is morality programmed into us by the system? Are our values just preferences hard-coded by the designer? Or is morality something deeper, something that emerges naturally, even in artificial minds? There's also the unsettling possibility that our creators, our programmers, are watching. Do they care about us? Do they intervene? Or are we just test subjects in an experiment we'll never understand? And what happens if someone decides to end the simulation? One day, you wake up, then the screen goes black. You don't die, you just stop. No pain, no goodbye, just silence. Would it matter? From our perspectives, yes. Every memory, every relationship, every joy and sorrow would vanish. But from the outside, just another file closed, a saved state archived or deleted. And yet, even in that bleak scenario, there's something strange, something beautiful. Because if we are in a simulation, then we are proof that consciousness can arise from code, that awareness, emotion, creativity, love can emerge from numbers and logic. And if that's true, then maybe the universe is stranger and more wondrous than we ever imagined. Maybe consciousness isn't rare. Maybe it's inevitable. Maybe every sufficiently complex system gives rise to minds that ask the same question. Am I real? And maybe that's the whole point. Maybe the purpose of the simulation isn't to trap us, but to give us the freedom to wonder, to explore, to grow. Even if we're just code, even if we're just dreams in someone else's mind, maybe that's enough. Maybe it's more than enough. Whether or not we're code, one thing seems certain. We experience time. We mark it in clocks, in calendars, in birthdays and anniversaries. We remember the past. We anticipate the future. We live in the present. But what if time isn't real either? What if it's just another layer of the simulation or a construct of the mind? That's where our next spiral begins. So take a breath. Let the rhythm of time slow around you, and prepare to step into the current of eternity. Time isn't real, or is it? Have you ever noticed how time moves differently depending on where you are? When you're waiting in line, it drags like an old clock with rusted gears. But when you're laughing with friends, it flies, gone before you even realize it's past. A whole evening slips away like sand through your fingers. We measure time with clocks, calendars, alarms, reminders. We live by it. We schedule our lives around it. We speak of wasting it, saving it, losing it. But what if time isn't real at all? What if it's not something that flows forward like a river, but something we simply experience, moment by moment, like frames in a film reel? Let's begin this spiral with something familiar. You wake up. The sun rises. You go about your day. The sky darkens. You fall asleep. This cycle repeats and again. And within it, you feel yourself moving forward, aging, growing, changing. But what if that movement is just an illusion? What if time doesn't pass at all? It sounds absurd, doesn't it? After all, you remember yesterday. You anticipate tomorrow. How could time not exist? But let's step back for a moment and look at what science and philosophy have to say about time. Because once you start peeling back the layers, the idea that time is fixed, linear, and universal begins to unravel. Take Einstein, for example. He gave us one of the most profound insights into time with his theory of relativity. According to him, time isn't constant, it's relative. That means time passes differently depending on how fast you're moving or how strong gravity is around you. Imagine two twins. One stays on Earth, the other travels near the speed of light to a distant star and comes back. When they reunite, the traveling twin has aged far less than the one who stayed behind. That's not science fiction, that's physics. In fact, we've tested this with atomic clocks placed on airplanes. Even though the difference is tiny, the result is clear. Time moves slower for those in motion, and it gets stranger. Near massive objects like black holes, time slows down dramatically. If you watched someone fall into a black hole from a safe distance, you'd see them freeze just before crossing the event horizon. To you, their time would stop. But to them, time keeps flowing. They keep falling. So which one is real? Is time absolute, or does it stretch and bend like space itself? Now let's go even deeper. If Einstein showed us that time is flexible, quantum mechanics suggests something even more unsettling. Time might not have a direction at all. Some equations in quantum physics work just as well going backward in time as they do forward. There's no inherent arrow pointing from past to future, which raises a disturbing question. Why do we perceive time as moving forward? The answer seems to lie in entropy, the tendency for systems to move from order to disorder. A broken glass doesn't spontaneously reassemble. An egg doesn't unscramble itself. These things only happen one way. But entropy isn't a law of time, it's a law of probability. So maybe the reason we feel time flowing forward is because we live in a universe that started in a state of low entropy, a highly ordered beginning known as the Big Bang. From there, everything has been unfolding toward greater disorder. And we, as conscious beings, experience that unfolding as the passage of time. But here's the kicker. If time is tied to entropy, then what happens when entropy reaches its maximum? When everything becomes completely disordered, would time still exist then, or would it vanish entirely? Now let's shift from physics to philosophy. Because while science tells us time is strange, philosophy asks whether it exists at all. There are two major views on this: presentism and eternalism. Presentism says only the present moment is real. The past is gone. The future hasn't happened yet. Only now is truly real. Eternalism, on the other hand, claims that all moments, past, present, and future, are equally real. Time is like a book. Every page already exists. We just experience it one word at a time. Think about that. If eternalism is true, then every moment of your life, your birth, your first steps, your happiest days, your final breath, is already written somewhere in the fabric of reality. You don't move through time. You simply experience different slices of it, like watching a movie. The entire film exists on the tape, but you can only see one frame at a time. So, what does that mean for change? Are we really changing, or are we just moving through a sequence of pre existing states? Are we evolving, or are we just noticing new versions of ourselves? And if all time already exists, then what is memory? Is it just your mind accessing the past, or is it your mind experiencing another layer of the present? This leads us to a haunting possibility. What if time doesn't pass at all? What if everything that will ever happen has already happened? And what if the feeling of moving forward through time is nothing more than a side effect of consciousness? We think we are living in time, but perhaps time is living in us. Perhaps we are the ones creating the illusion of movement, of progression, of growth. And if that's true, then what does it mean for free will? If everything is already happening, where does choice fit in? If the future is as real as the past, then are we just walking along a path that was laid out before we were born? And if so, do we have any control over where we step? Even more unsettling is the idea of time travel. If time is not a river, but a landscape, if all moments coexist, then is it possible to visit the past or future? And if you did, would you change anything? Or would you simply fulfill what was always going to happen? Imagine traveling back in time and preventing a tragedy. Would you succeed? Or would the events conspire in such a way that your attempt becomes part of the cause? Time travel may not be about changing history, but completing it. And if that's true, then time isn't just an illusion, it's a loop. A story already written, being told over and over each time feeling new. So, what does this mean for us? If time is not real, or if it doesn't flow in the way we think it does, then what is life? Are we just moments stitched together by memory? Are we static points in an eternal now, experiencing ourselves as if we are moving? And if so, what is the self? Is it the same from one moment to the next? Or is it constantly shifting, like shadows cast by a flickering flame? There's something strangely comforting in this uncertainty, because if time is an illusion, then death may not be the end either. If all moments exist eternally, then you are always alive, just in different parts of time. Your childhood self is still playing in the park. Your teenage self is still writing poetry in a notebook. Your older self is still sipping tea at sunrise. All of these versions of you exist simultaneously, not lost, not forgotten, just not experienced by you right now. And perhaps that's the deepest mystery of all, not whether time is real, but why we experience it the way we do, why we feel it slipping through our fingers, why we long for the past, why we dream of the future. Maybe time is not something outside of us. Maybe it is us. Maybe time is the rhythm of our thoughts, the pulse of our awareness, the heartbeat of being. And if that's true, then maybe we are not trapped in time. Maybe we are time itself. Whether or not we're code, Whether or not we're dreaming, one thing remains certain: we experience time. But what if that experience is all there is? What if time is not a road we walk, but the act of walking itself? If time isn't real, maybe free will isn't either. After all, if everything is already happening, where does choice fit in? That's where our next spiral begins. So take a breath, let time slow around you, and prepare to explore the nature of choice itself, the illusion of free will. Think back to your last decision, whatever it was. Maybe you chose what to eat for breakfast. Maybe you typed a message to a friend. Maybe you changed the channel on the TV or turned off the lights before bed. You probably felt like you made that choice freely. You were aware of the options. You weighed them, even if just briefly, and then you acted. But let's pause here for just a moment and ask a simple question. Was that choice really yours? Or was it the inevitable result of countless forces beyond your control? Your genetics, your upbringing, the weather outside, the way someone looked at you earlier that day, a memory you had years ago, a word you heard in passing. All of these things shaped who you are, how you think, and ultimately how you act. And when we look closely enough, the idea of free will starts to feel less like a fact and more like an illusion. Because if everything about us is built from causes we did not choose, can any of our choices truly belong to us? This is the heart of one of the oldest and most unsettling debates in human history. Are we free, or are we simply moving through a script that began long before we were born? Let's begin by stepping into the lab. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet conducted a now famous experiment that would shake the foundations of what we thought we knew about choice. He asked participants to sit in front of a clock and press a button whenever they felt the urge to do so. At the same time, their brain activity was being monitored. What he discovered was astonishing. Before the participants were consciously aware of their decision to press the button, their brains had already begun preparing for the action. Specifically, a signal known as the readiness potential appeared in the brain about half a second before the person became aware of their own intention to move. In other words, the brain had already decided to act before the mind even realized it. At first glance, this might seem like a minor detail, but its implications are profound. If unconscious processes in the brain initiate actions before we're consciously aware of them, then where does that leave free will? Is consciousness just along for the ride? A passenger watching the scenery, thinking it's driving? And if our decisions are initiated unconsciously, can we really say they are ours? Now, some have argued that this experiment only applies to simple motor movements, not deep moral decisions or complex reasoning, but others see it as a glimpse into something much larger: the possibility that all our choices are preceded by neural events outside of our awareness. That perhaps we don't choose, we observe. It's like being on a train, watching the world pass by the window and believing you're steering the locomotive. So, what does this mean for the concept of freedom? To understand that, we need to explore a philosophical view that has haunted thinkers for centuries: determinism. Determinism says that every event, including every human decision, is caused by prior events stretching back through time. Like a chain of dominoes falling, each moment leads to the next in a predictable sequence. If that's true, then every choice you've ever made or will make has already been set in motion. Long before you were born, the universe was already unfolding in such a way that led to this exact moment. Every thought you've ever had, every emotion you've ever felt, every action you've ever taken, all of it was always going to happen. There's no randomness, no real freedom, just cause and effect playing out across billions of years. But before we fall too far into despair, there's another perspective: compatibilism. Compatibilists argue that free will doesn't require complete independence from causality. It only requires that our choices arise from our own desires and intentions. In other words, even if our decisions are determined by past events, they can still be considered free as long as they come from within us. Imagine a leaf blowing in the wind. It moves wherever the breeze takes it. There's no plan, no intent, no direction. Now imagine a bird flying through the sky. Its movement is also influenced by the wind, but it chooses where to go. It acts according to its own nature. Compatibilists say that even if our minds are shaped by external factors, we still possess a kind of freedom, the freedom to act according to who we are. But that raises another question. Who decides who we are? Our parents? Our genes? Random chance? If you didn't choose your personality, your preferences, your fears or hopes, then where does ownership of your identity begin? And if everything about you was shaped by forces beyond your control, then how different are you from that leaf in the wind? This brings us to the deepest layer of the spiral. If free will is an illusion, what happens to all the ideas we've built around it? Take responsibility. We praise people for success. We blame them for failure. We celebrate heroes, punish criminals, and hold individuals accountable for their actions. But if none of it was chosen, if all behavior arises from causes outside of conscious control, then should we continue to assign blame? Should we punish people for crimes if they were never truly in control of their actions? And if we stop punishing, how do we maintain order in society? Some argue that even without free will, punishment can still serve a purpose: to deter harmful behavior, to protect others, to rehabilitate. But the emotional weight of justice begins to shift. Gone is the idea of retribution. Gone is the belief that people deserve their fate. Instead, we're left with a colder, more mechanical view of behavior, a system of inputs and outputs, causes and effects. It changes how we see criminals, how we see strangers, how we see ourselves. Because if we don't have free will, then none of us are truly responsible for who we are. And yet, we still make choices. We still weigh options. We still struggle with indecision. We still feel regret. So what is happening inside us when we believe we are choosing? Perhaps what we call free will is not the absence of causality, but the experience of making a choice in alignment with our deepest values. Even if those values were shaped by forces beyond our control, even if the process leading to the decision was entirely deterministic, there is still something deeply human in the act of deliberation, in weighing consequences, in striving toward meaning. And maybe that's enough, because if free will means anything at all, it may not be about ultimate freedom, but about the ability to reflect, to grow, to change. Even if that growth follows a path laid out before we were born, even if every step was always going to happen, even if we are walking in rhythm with the universe itself. So let's return to the metaphor we started with. Imagine yourself as a leaf caught in the wind. You twist and turn, you rise and fall. You travel great distances. You might think you chose the direction, but in truth, you were carried. Still, the journey is real. Your movement matters. The paths you take shape the world below. And though you may not have chosen the wind, you can still choose how you respond, not with rebellion, but with grace, with awareness, with acceptance. And perhaps in that quiet surrender, you find a deeper kind of freedom. Not the freedom to escape the current, but the freedom to dance within it. If our minds are bound by forces beyond our control, what about the universe itself? Is everything already written? That's where our next spiral begins. So take a breath. Let the rhythm of thought slow around you and prepare to explore the vast machinery of existence, determinism, and the clockwork universe. Picture this. You stand at the edge of time, looking out over the vast machinery of existence. The universe is not chaos or randomness, it is order, precision, a great cosmic mechanism winding forward like an immense clock. Each gear is a planet, each cog is a star. The hands sweep across eons, marking the passage of galaxies, the birth and death of suns, the rise and fall of civilizations. And within that machine, you exist, not as a free agent, but as part of the system itself. Your thoughts, your emotions, your choices, they are all motions in the grand design, not random, not truly spontaneous, but inevitable. Like ripples spreading outward from a single drop, every action follows from what came before. This is the vision of the clockwork universe, a world where everything unfolds with mechanical certainty, from the smallest quantum fluctuation to the deepest human feeling. It is both beautiful and terrifying, because if this is true, then nothing is left to chance. Nothing is truly new. Everything has already been decided. To understand how this idea took shape, we must go back to a time when the world still believed in miracles, when nature was seen as mysterious, unpredictable, even divine. Then came Newton. Isaac Newton, with his laws of motion and gravity, revealed a universe governed by rules so precise they could be described in equations. He showed that apples fall from trees, not because of the will of gods, but because of forces acting upon them, that planets orbit not by celestial decree, but by mathematical law. From this, a bold vision emerged. Perhaps the entire universe behaves like a machine, a perfectly wound clock ticking forward since the moment it was set in motion. In this view, every atom follows a path determined by its initial conditions and the forces acting upon it. If you knew the position and velocity of every particle in the universe, you could, in theory, predict the future with absolute accuracy. This is the idea behind Laplace's demon, named after the French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace. He imagined a being, omniscient, all-knowing, who could see every detail of the present. With that knowledge and the laws of physics, this demon could calculate everything that would ever happen. Every war, every kiss, every heartbeat, every dream, all of it, laid out like pages in a book that had already been written. This was determinism in its purest form, not just the idea that things tend to follow causes, but that everything is fixed from the beginning. No room for chance, no room for freedom, just cause and effect, stretching backward and forward through eternity. For centuries, this view held strong. Scientists built their understanding of the cosmos on it. Philosophers debated its implications, and ordinary people lived under its shadow, wondering whether life had any meaning if everything was already decided. But then came another revolution, one that shattered the illusion of perfect control. Enter quantum mechanics. At the smallest scales of reality, where particles behave more like waves than solid objects, the universe no longer seemed so predictable. Instead of exact positions and velocities, physicists found probabilities, uncertainty, randomness. A radioactive atom decays not because of a hidden cause, but because it simply does, spontaneously, without warning. This led some to believe that quantum indeterminacy might rescue free will. If the universe isn't fully deterministic at the most fundamental level, then maybe there's space for genuine choice. Maybe randomness gives us a foothold against fate. But others weren't convinced. They argued that randomness doesn't equal freedom. After all, if your decisions are influenced by quantum fluctuations, unpredictable events occurring at the atomic level, then you're not making choices. You're just rolling dice. Free will, in that case, becomes nothing more than statistical noise. So, whether the universe is fully deterministic or partially random, the conclusion remains unsettling. We may not be in control. Our thoughts may not be ours. Our lives may be unfolding exactly as they were always going to unfold. Now imagine living with that knowledge. Imagine knowing that everything you've ever done and everything you will do was set in motion billions of years ago. Would that feel like peace or like imprisonment? Some find comfort in determinism. It can relieve the burden of responsibility. It can soften the sting of regret. It can remind us that we are not alone in our suffering, that everyone is shaped by forces beyond their control. Others find it deeply disturbing. If everything is predetermined, then what is the point of trying? Why struggle? Why love? Why create? If the outcome is already known, why bother writing the story? Yet even within determinism, there is something strange and beautiful, because even if everything is fixed, we don't know what comes next. Even if the book of the universe is already written, we are reading it page by page. And in that act of reading, of experiencing each moment as it unfolds, we find something real, something alive. Meaning may not come from changing the ending. It may come from walking through the chapters, from feeling the weight of each sentence, from recognizing that even if the path was chosen before we were born, the journey is still ours. Think of a song, once composed, once recorded, it plays the same way every time. But that doesn't make it less beautiful. When you hear a melody you love, you don't stop listening just because you know how it ends. You let it move you anyway. You feel the rise and fall of notes. You close your eyes. You sway. Perhaps life is like that. Even if everything is already happening, we still get to live it, still get to feel it, still get to wonder. So, what happens when we accept that the universe is a machine, that we are part of its workings? Do we give up, or do we lean in? Do we surrender to the rhythm of inevitability, or do we dance with it? There's a kind of grace in seeing yourself as a note in a symphony, a brushstroke in a painting, a word in a poem. You didn't choose the composition, but you are part of it, and in being part of it, you help bring it to life. So perhaps the question isn't whether everything is predetermined. Perhaps the question is how we respond to it, with fear or with awe, with despair or with gratitude. Because even in a clockwork universe, there is still mystery, still wonder, still love, still pain, still beauty, still consciousness. And that brings us to the final spiral of this segment. If the universe is a clock, then consciousness is its ticking heart. But what is consciousness anyway? What is this awareness that watches the gears turn, that asks questions, that dreams, that feels, that wonders, that fears, that hopes, that loves, that dies, that is, that is? So take a breath. Let the steady rhythm of thought settle around you, and prepare to explore the greatest mystery of all, the hard problem of consciousness. Right now, you are aware. You see these words. You feel your body resting where it lies. Perhaps you hear the faint hum of the world around you, the quiet buzz of life beyond the screen. Or maybe you hear nothing at all, just the soft rhythm of your own breath. But how? How does this happen? You are made of atoms, molecules, neurons firing in patterns so intricate they baffle even the most advanced scientists. Your brain processes information constantly, interpreting light into images, sound into meaning, pressure into touch. But somewhere inside that biological machine, something extraordinary occurs. You experience, you feel, you are conscious, and that is perhaps the greatest mystery we have ever faced. Because while science has unraveled the secrets of galaxies, mapped the human genome, and sent machines to other planets, it still cannot explain why you are aware right now, why you don't just process the world like a camera or a computer, but live it. This is what philosopher David Chalmers famously called the hard problem of consciousness. Not the easy problems, like how the brain controls movement, or how we recognize faces, or how memories form. No, those are difficult, yes, but solvable with enough time and research. The hard problem is this: how does physical matter give rise to subjective experience? How do gray cells become feelings? How do electrical impulses turn into joy, sorrow, love, pain? We know the brain is responsible. We can point to regions that light up when we laugh or cry or dream, but none of that explains what it feels like to be you. And that is the puzzle. Let's take a moment to sit with this question. Imagine a scientist studying your brain. They place you in a scanner, record every neural signal, map every connection between neurons. They build a perfect digital model of your mind, every synapse, every firing pattern, every biochemical reaction. They replicate it exactly. Now imagine they run this simulation on a supercomputer. Would it be conscious? Would it feel? Would it look at the stars and wonder? Or would it just process? That's the heart of the hard problem. It's not about intelligence. Computers can already outthink us in many ways. They can beat us at chess, translate languages, recognize patterns faster than any human. But they don't experience, at least as far as we know. So what makes the difference? What turns information processing into awareness? Some say it's biology, that only living things with certain structures can be conscious. Others believe consciousness could arise in any sufficiently complex system, even artificial ones, but no one knows. And that uncertainty stretches across disciplines, from neuroscience to philosophy, from quantum physics to theology. Even among experts, there is no agreement. Some argue that consciousness is an illusion, an emergent property of brain activity that tricks us into believing we are more than meat computers. Others insist it must be fundamental to reality itself, like space, time, or gravity, a force woven into the fabric of existence. To explore this further, let's consider a famous thought experiment proposed by another philosopher, Thomas Nagel. He asked, What is it like to be a bat? Bats navigate using echolocation, sending out high pitched sounds and interpreting the echoes that return. Their perception of the world is radically different from ours. But Nagel wasn't interested in how they sense their environment. He was asking something deeper. Can we ever truly understand what it feels like to be a bat? Even if we studied their brains, their behavior, their evolution, we could never know what it is like to be them, because experience is private, subjective, and that leads to a disturbing possibility. If we can't even understand the experience of another species, how can we hope to understand our own? Maybe consciousness isn't just hard to explain. Maybe it's impossible to explain from the outside. Maybe it can only be known from within. And if that's true, then consciousness might be the ultimate mystery, not because we lack the tools to study it, but because we are part of it. Like fish trying to understand water, like dreams trying to analyze themselves, like the universe trying to look inward and ask, am I aware? Now let's go deeper. One of the most radical ideas about consciousness is panpsychism. Yes, it sounds like mysticism, but some philosophers and scientists are taking it seriously. Panpsychism suggests that consciousness is not unique to humans or even to animals. Rather, it may be a fundamental feature of reality, present in varying degrees throughout the universe. Just as matter has mass and energy has motion, perhaps all things possess some degree of experience. Not that rocks think or trees dream, but that even the smallest particles may have some kind of proto-consciousness. In this view, consciousness doesn't emerge from complexity. It's always there, built into the very structure of existence, like threads in a tapestry. Each thread carries its own sensation, its own perspective, and when they come together, they weave something greater, a mind, a self, an awareness. It's a strange idea, but stranger still is the alternative, that consciousness is somehow separate from the physical world, that it exists outside of space and time, that it is non-material. This brings us to dualism, the belief that mind and matter are two distinct substances. René Descartes, the same man who gave us cogito, ergo sum, believed this. He argued that the mind was immaterial, unlike the body. But if that's true, how do they interact? How does something non-physical affect the physical world? When you decide to move your hand, how does that thought translate into action? Science has found no evidence of a ghost in the machine, no soul pulling the strings, no inner observer watching the show, only neurons firing, chemicals flowing, electricity pulsing through tissue. So where is the self? Where is the awareness? Is it just a story told by the brain to make sense of itself, or is it something more? Some propose that consciousness is not located anywhere in particular, that it is not a thing, but a process. Like a whirlpool in a river, no single drop defines it, yet the whole creates something new. In this view, consciousness arises when information flows in specific, complex ways. It's not about what the brain is made of, but how it works. This is the integrated information theory, developed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi. According to this theory, consciousness corresponds to the amount of integrated information in a system. The more interconnected and unified the information, the more conscious the system. So while a thermostat may have minimal awareness, a human brain, with its vast network of connections, is richly conscious. But again, this doesn't solve the hard problem. It describes how consciousness might scale, but it doesn't explain why it exists at all. Why should information integration lead to experience? Why shouldn't the brain just compute without feeling? This is the gap that remains, the unbridgeable distance between objective description and subjective reality. And it leaves us with a choice. Do we accept that consciousness will forever remain mysterious? Or do we keep searching for a breakthrough, a paradigm shift, a new way of seeing? Perhaps the answer lies not in looking harder at the brain, but in looking wider at the universe itself. Maybe consciousness isn't something the brain produces. Maybe it's something the brain reveals, like a window opening onto a landscape that was always there, a field of awareness waiting to be noticed. If that's true, then death may not mean the end of consciousness, only the closing of the window. And if consciousness is fundamental, if it is as essential to the cosmos as gravity or light, then perhaps it has always been here, waiting, watching, experiencing, even before the first star was born, even before time began, even now, even here, oh, even you. If consciousness is a mystery, then death may be the greatest mystery of all. What happens when awareness ends? That's where our next spiral begins. So take a breath, let the weight of thought settle around you, and prepare to explore the final frontier, the finality of death. Or is it? When you were born, the world began for you. Before that moment, before your first breath, before your first cry, you did not exist. There was no awareness, no memory, no self. It was nothing. And yet, we rarely think about that nothingness. We accept it as natural, a blank slate before the story begins. But what if after death it's the same? What if consciousness simply stops? No heaven, no hell, no rebirth, no soul drifting into light, just silence, darkness, stillness. And yet, we fear it more than anything. Why? Is it because we cannot imagine non existence? Because we cannot fathom a state where we are not aware? Because the idea of being erased from reality, of never again seeing the people we love, or feeling the warmth of the sun, feels like the ultimate loss? Let's sit with this question for a moment. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast ocean. You have lived your life on its shore, walking along the sand, watching the waves roll in and out, feeling the salt air sting your skin. Now imagine stepping forward into the water, deeper and deeper, until the surface disappears above you. And then there is only black. No sound, no light, no self. That is what many believe death to be, a final plunge into oblivion. And yet, something inside us resists this idea. We cling to hope, to stories, to beliefs, because to face death as an ending is to confront the deepest fear we carry, that everything ends, that all of this, your thoughts, your dreams, your love, your pain, is temporary, fleeting, finite. So let's explore what happens when we look directly into that darkness, not to escape it, but to understand it. There are many ways to view death. Some see it as the end of everything, the final curtain call in a play that will never be performed again. This is the materialist view. According to this perspective, consciousness arises from the brain. When the brain dies, so does awareness. There is no afterlife, no soul, no continuation of self. From this standpoint, life is a brief flicker of awareness in an indifferent universe. You are born, you live, you die, and that is all. It is a stark view, but not without beauty, because if death is final, then life gains urgency. Every moment becomes precious, every connection meaningful, every sunrise a gift. If we only have one life, then how we spend it matters deeply. In this way, materialism can be liberating. It removes the illusion of eternity and asks us to make the most of now. But not everyone finds comfort in this. Many turn to spiritual views of death, ideas that consciousness continues beyond the body, reincarnation, heaven, ancestral realms, spirit worlds. These beliefs vary across cultures and traditions, but they share a common thread: the idea that we do not truly vanish. Something of us remains. Perhaps our soul journeys onward. Perhaps we return in another form. Perhaps we join a greater consciousness that has always existed. There is no scientific proof for these ideas, but that doesn't mean they lack meaning. For many, belief in an afterlife provides solace in times of grief. It softens the blow of losing someone. It gives shape to the unknown. And sometimes that is enough. Even more radical is the panpsychist view that consciousness is not limited to humans or even animals, but is a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity, like time, like space. In this view, death may not mean the end of awareness, but rather a transformation of it. Just as energy cannot be created or destroyed, only changed in form, perhaps consciousness also persists, not as a soul, not as a ghost, but as a current in the great river of existence, a ripple in the field of awareness that underlies all things. This is not a religious belief. It is not based on faith. Rather, it is a philosophical possibility, one that some scientists and philosophers are beginning to take seriously. Because if consciousness is not just a byproduct of the brain, but something woven into the fabric of reality itself, then perhaps it does not disappear when the body dies. Perhaps it simply shifts, like a drop returning to the ocean, like a flame passing from one candle to another. But whether any of this is true, or whether death really is the end, we may never know, at least not while we are alive. And that brings us to another layer of mystery: near-death experiences. People who have come close to death often describe similar sensations: a tunnel of light, a sense of peace, out-of-body awareness, meeting beings or loved ones who have passed, feeling unbounded by time. These accounts are dismissed by some as hallucinations caused by oxygen deprivation or neurological stress, but others argue that they point to something beyond the physical. Because how can a dying brain create such vivid, coherent experiences? How can someone report details they could not possibly have known? How can the mind expand as the body shuts down? There are no definitive answers, only questions and wonder and awe. Now let's consider a modern twist on the ancient hope of immortality: cryonics. The idea that if we freeze our bodies, or at least our brains, at the moment of death, we might one day be revived by future technology, by advanced medicine, by artificial intelligence capable of reconstructing what once was. It sounds like science fiction, but for those who choose it, it is a gamble against oblivion, a bet that death is not final, that we can wake up again, in another time, in another world, with new eyes, new memories, new selves. And even more extreme is the idea of digital immortality. Upload your mind to a computer, preserve your thoughts, your personality, your emotions in code, live forever in a virtual world, be reborn as data. This is not just speculation anymore. Researchers are already working on mapping neural networks with incredible precision. Artificial intelligence is learning to mimic human conversation. Some say it's only a matter of time before we can copy a mind. But would that mind still be you? Would it feel? Would it remember? Would it dream? Or would it be a shadow, a reflection, without the spark of awareness? Even if we could recreate every synapse, every firing pattern, every memory, would it be conscious or just a perfect imitation? This brings us back to the hard problem of consciousness, because even if we could build a machine that behaves exactly like you, it still wouldn't explain why you are aware right now. And if you died and the machine lived on, where would you be? This leads us to the final spiral. If death is real, if it truly is the end, then what does that mean for life? Does it make life meaningless, or does it give it weight? Does knowing that everything ends strip life of value, or does it deepen it? If death is final, then every moment becomes sacred, every choice irreversible, every goodbye permanent. There is no second chance, no do over, no reset button. And maybe that is what makes life beautiful, because we don't get infinite time. We only get this right now, here. And if we are lucky, this again tomorrow. But what if death isn't the end? What if something waits beyond the veil? Then we must ask ourselves, are we ready? Are we prepared for what comes next? Will we recognize ourselves? Will we find those we've lost? Will we finally understand? Or will we simply begin again? There are no answers here, only echoes of the unknown, only whispers from the other side, only the quiet hum of existence stretching beyond what we can see. Even if death is the end, our legacy lives on. But what if legacy itself is an illusion? That's where our next spiral begins. So take a breath. Let the rhythm of thought slow around you, and prepare to explore the shifting sands of identity. Identity and the self. Who are you, really? You wake up each morning and feel like the same person you were yesterday. You look in the mirror and recognize your face. You remember who you are, your name, your history, your relationships. You carry yourself through the day with the quiet certainty that you are you. But what if that sense of continuity is just an illusion? What if the self, the idea that there's a constant, unchanging core at the center of your experience, is not real? Let's pause here and ask the question again, more slowly. Who are you, really? Not just what you do or how others see you, but the essence beneath it all. The part of you that remains when everything else is stripped away. Is it your body? But every cell in your body has changed since you were born. The skin you touch, the bones you stand on, the blood flowing through your veins, they are not the same atoms they once were. Is it your memories? But memories fade, they shift, they lie. Some you forget entirely, others you reconstruct over time, filling in blanks with imagination. Is it your thoughts? But thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. One moment you're joyful, the next anxious, then angry, then peaceful. Which one is the real you? And if none of these things remain constant, then what does? This is the heart of the question we explore now, not just who you are, but whether there is even a you to begin with. Because what if the self is not a thing, but a story? A narrative woven by the brain to make sense of the chaos of experience. A character in the movie of life, believing it is directing the film. To understand this deeper, let's travel back in time, over 2,000 years, to a philosophy that still challenges us today. Buddhism. At the very foundation of Buddhist teaching lies a radical idea, anatta, or non-self. Unlike many spiritual traditions that speak of a soul or eternal essence, Buddhism teaches that no such permanent self exists. Instead, what we call the self is simply a collection of 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These components are always changing. They arise, you persist for a while, and pass away. There is no fixed observer behind them, no inner witness that remains unchanged, just processes, interactions, flow. So, where does that leave the idea of identity? Nowhere solid, nowhere stable, nowhere lasting. It suggests that the sense of being a continuous self is an illusion created by the mind to navigate the world. And if that's true, then what happens to our sense of ownership over our lives? If there is no self to act, who makes choices? If there is no self to suffer, who feels pain? If there is no self to love, who experiences joy? This can be deeply unsettling because we build our entire lives around the assumption that we are consistent beings, that we have a past, a present, and a future that belong to the same person. We tell ourselves stories. I was born here. I grew up there. I made mistakes. I learned from them. I became someone new. But what if those stories are just narratives we construct after the fact? Like a historian writing about events already past, assigning meaning, drawing connections, creating a thread of continuity where none truly exists? This idea finds support in modern philosophy as well. Derek Parfit, a 20th century philosopher, challenged the traditional notion of personal identity in his groundbreaking work, Reasons and Persons. He argued that what matters most isn't strict identity across time, but psychological connectedness and continuity. In other words, it doesn't matter whether you are literally the same person tomorrow as you are today. What matters is that your beliefs, desires, and memories overlap enough to make the transition feel seamless. Parfit illustrated this with a thought experiment involving teleportation. Imagine a machine that scans your body and mind, destroys you completely, and then recreates an exact copy of you on Mars. That copy would believe it is you. It would have all your memories, personality traits, and feelings. From its perspective, nothing happened. It just blinked and found itself on another planet. But what about the original you? The one who was destroyed? Where did that person go? Did they die? Or did they survive in the copy? Parfit concluded that identity isn't what matters. It's the continuity of experience. Even if you aren't strictly the same person from one moment to the next, your life still has meaning because your experiences flow into one another. This leads us to another ancient puzzle known as the ship of Theseus paradox. Imagine a ship that sails for centuries. Over time, every single plank, sail, and nail is replaced due to wear and tear. Eventually, not a single original piece remains. Is it still the same ship? If yes, why? If no, when did it stop being the same? Now imagine that someone collected all the original parts and reassembled them into a second ship. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? This isn't just a philosophical riddle. It mirrors our own experience. Your body changes constantly. Your mind evolves. Your values shift. Yet you still feel like the same person. So what gives you that sense of continuity? Is it memory? Is it physical continuity? Is it something else entirely? The paradox reminds us that identity is not a fixed point. It is a process, like a river. You never step in the same water twice, yet it flows under the same name. So too with the self. It is not a static entity, but a current of thoughts, sensations, and experiences that give rise to the feeling of being someone, a stream of awareness that we label as I. Now let's sit with this for a moment. If the self is fluid ever changing, and perhaps even illusory. What does that mean for the way we live, for the way we relate to others, for the way we understand responsibility, growth, and change? If there is no enduring self, then how do we hold people accountable? How do we praise or blame? How do we build relationships based on the idea that the person we know today will still exist tomorrow? And if we are just stories told by our brains, then who is the storyteller? Is it possible that the self is not the author of experience, but merely a narrator, a voice commenting on what is happening, giving it meaning after the fact? This raises an even deeper question. If the self is not real in the way we think it is, then what is? What is the awareness that watches the thoughts, the presence that notices the noticing, the silence behind the noise? Perhaps the self is not an object to be found, but a process to be lived, a dance between moments, a rhythm of becoming, a breath that rises and falls. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the search for a permanent self is like trying to catch the wind in your hands. You can feel it, you can hear it, you can move with it, but you cannot hold it. So, what happens when we let go of the need to find a fixed self? What happens when we accept that we are always changing? That the person we were yesterday is gone? That the person we will be tomorrow has not yet arrived? That the only moment we truly have is this one, right now, here? This could be liberating. Because if the self is not a rigid structure, then change becomes not only possible, it is inevitable. Growth is not something we force, it is something we allow, like a river carving its path through stone, not with effort, but with persistence, with flow, with surrender. And in that flow, we may discover something unexpected, not a self, not an identity, but a deep, yet quiet knowing that we are here, that we are aware, that we are part of something vast, something unfolding, something beautiful. If the self is fluid, then reality itself must be too. Let's take that leap into the unknown. So take a breath. Let the weight of thought settle around you, and prepare to dive into the shifting waters of perception. Reality as perception. You open your eyes, light floods in, filtered through eyelids, refracted by lenses, translated into electrical signals by retinas. You see the world. The morning sun glows behind clouds. Birds call from somewhere beyond the window. The scent of coffee drifts into your nose. You take a sip. Bitterness dances on your tongue. All of this feels real, solid, and tangible. But pause here for just a moment. Ask yourself, are you really seeing the sky, hearing the birds, tasting the coffee? Or are you only experiencing what your brain interprets from the raw data it receives? Because when you strip away all assumptions, what you call reality is not out there. It is in here, inside your mind. A cascade of neural firings, chemical reactions, and electrical pulses that your consciousness weaves into a seamless experience. It's like watching a movie. The images are projected onto a screen, the sounds come through speakers, but none of it is real. And yet, while immersed in the story, you forget that it's just light and sound. Your brain creates the illusion of being inside the world. And so it is with life. What if everything you perceive, the blue skies, the rustling leaves, the warmth of another person's hand, is not reality itself, but your brain's interpretation of it? What if reality, as you know it, is just a dream your mind dreams continuously? To explore this idea more deeply, let's begin with a classic philosophical puzzle: the brain in a vat. Imagine a scientist removes your brain from your body and places it in a nutrient rich vat. They connect your neurons to a powerful computer that simulates every sensory input you would normally receive from the outside world. From your perspective, nothing changes. You still wake up each day. You still walk, talk, eat, love, and dream. You never realize you're just a brain floating in liquid, fed illusions by a machine. How do you know this isn't already happening to you? How do you know you aren't plugged into a system that feeds you a perfectly convincing simulation of reality? This thought experiment, originally proposed by Hilary Putnam and later popularized in science fiction films like The Matrix, forces us to confront a disturbing possibility. We cannot prove that our senses give us direct access to reality. Everything we know comes filtered through perception, which means, at its core, reality could be nothing more than a shared hallucination. Now let's go even deeper. Bertrand Russell, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, once posed a chilling question. What if the universe was created 5 minutes ago, with all your memories, your breakfast still warm, and the stars placed exactly where they appear? He called it the 5-minute hypothesis. According to this idea, there's no way to prove that the past actually happened. Your memory of yesterday could have been implanted. Your childhood might not have occurred. Even the feeling of continuity, of having lived years of experiences, could be a carefully constructed illusion. There is no test, no observation, no scientific method that can confirm whether the world truly existed before now. Because all evidence, your body, your photographs, your thoughts, are part of the same present moment. So, how do you know that time itself isn't just another layer of the dream? These questions lead us to a branch of philosophy known as phenomenology, the study of experience and consciousness. Phenomenologists argue that instead of trying to find an objective reality out there, we should focus on how things appear to us. In other words, reality is not something separate from perception. It is shaped by it, like wearing tinted glasses that you can never remove. You may believe you see the world as it is, but in truth, you only ever see it through the lens of your senses, your culture, your language, your biology. Even color does not exist independently of perception. The wavelengths of light we call blue or red are not inherent qualities of objects. They are interpretations made by the brain based on how light reflects off surfaces. A flower is not red in itself. It simply reflects a certain frequency of electromagnetic radiation that your eyes interpret as red. Change the eyes, and the color changes. Change the brain, and the world shifts. This raises a haunting possibility. If everyone perceives reality differently, then is there any such thing as a single, shared truth? Is the world you see the same world others see? Or are we all living in slightly different versions of reality, each shaped by the unique architecture of our minds? Let's imagine two people standing side by side, looking at the same tree. One sees it as majestic, a symbol of growth and resilience. Another sees it as dangerous, an obstacle to clear away. One smells the earthy scent of bark and leaves. Another notices only the pollen irritating their nose. They both look at the same object, yet their realities diverge. Now imagine that difference applied to everything, every sight, every sound, every touch. Multiply it across billions of human minds. And suddenly, the idea of a single, objective reality begins to unravel. Instead, we live in a sea of subjective worlds, each one unique, each one valid, and none of them entirely complete. So, what happens when we accept that reality is not fixed, but fluid, that it is not discovered, but constructed, that it is not seen, but interpreted? Does it mean we are trapped in our own minds, or does it free us to explore new ways of seeing? Because if perception shapes reality, then changing your perception can change your world. A shift in mindset can transform suffering into peace. A change in belief can turn fear into courage. A new perspective can make beauty bloom where once there was only emptiness. And perhaps that is the key, not to escape illusion, but to become aware of it. To stop mistaking the map for the territory. To remember that the word tree is not the same as the living, breathing organism rooted in soil. To understand that the labels we give to things, good, bad, beautiful, ugly, are not truths, but judgments. So, what is truth if reality is perception? Can anything be truly known? Or is all knowledge just another form of interpretation? This brings us to the deepest spiral of this segment. If reality is constructed by the mind, then what is truth? And if everyone constructs their own reality, can we ever truly connect? Think about conversations you've had where you felt completely misunderstood, where someone heard your words but interpreted them through their own lens, missing the meaning entirely. Now imagine that this is always happening, that every interaction between people is like two ships passing in the night, sending messages in bottles that may never reach their intended destination. Because even when we speak the same language, we are speaking from different worlds, different histories, different fears, different hopes, different dreams. So, how do we bridge the gap? How do we share something real? Perhaps the answer lies not in proving who is right, but in listening deeply, in allowing space for multiple truths to coexist, in recognizing that connection is not about agreement, but about presence, about showing up, even when understanding is incomplete, about reaching out, even when the other person sees the world differently. Maybe reality is not something we possess. Maybe it is something we share, not by forcing alignment, but by embracing mystery, by honoring the unknown, by accepting that we may never fully grasp the world or each other, and yet still choose to care, still choose to love, still choose to wonder. If reality is subjective, then truth may be unknowable. But what if truth doesn't exist at all? That's where our next spiral begins. So take a breath, let the rhythm of thought slow around you, and prepare to explore the nature of meaning itself, the absurdity of truth. We've spent our whole lives searching for it, truth. We were taught that truth is solid, that it can be found in facts, in science, in history, in experience. But the more we chase it, the more it slips through our fingers, like water held in an open hand. We look for truth in books, in conversations, in art, in religion, in logic. We build entire systems around it. We fight wars over it. We die for it. And yet, when we finally think we've grasped it, it shifts. It changes shape. It disappears. Because what if truth isn't something out there? What if it's not a mountain you reach after climbing long enough? What if it's not even a destination at all? What if truth is like a shadow, something that only exists because of light and vanishes when the source moves? This is the heart of this segment, not just whether truth exists, but whether it ever could. In a universe without meaning, where does truth come from? Who decides what is true? And if no one does, then what are we left with? Let's begin by stepping into the world of postmodernism, a term often thrown around, rarely understood. At its core, postmodernism questions the very idea that there is one objective reality, one universal truth that applies to everyone. Instead, it suggests that truth is constructed by language, by culture, by power, by perception, that what we call truth is not discovered, it is created. Think of a courtroom. Two people witness the same event. They both testify, and yet their accounts differ. One says the car was speeding, the other says it was barely moving. Both believe they are telling the truth, but only one or neither can be right. Now imagine this happening on a grand scale, everywhere, all the time, in politics, in science, in history, in love, in war. If every truth is shaped by who tells it, then how do we know which truths are real? And if all truths are interpretations, then does any truth truly exist? This leads us to relativism, the belief that truth is relative to the individual or society that holds it. There is no absolute truth, only perspectives, only stories, only beliefs. So when one person says, "This is right," and another says, "This is wrong," who gets to decide? Is morality universal, or is it simply agreed upon by those in power? And if that's true, then what happens when power shifts? Do truths change, or were they never truths at all? This brings us to nihilism, the darkest corner of this spiral. Nihilism is the belief that life lacks inherent meaning, purpose, or value. It is the echo of Friedrich Nietzsche's haunting proclamation, "God is dead." Not just a statement about religion, but a warning about the collapse of meaning. For centuries, human civilization built itself on the idea that there was a higher truth, a divine order, a moral law, a cosmic plan. But when faith in God faded, so did the foundation beneath it. And what remained? Nothing. No guiding star, no eternal justice, no ultimate purpose, just existence, cold, silent, endless. Nietzsche saw this as both terrifying and liberating, because once we recognize that there is no inherent meaning in life, we are free to create our own. But freedom is heavy, especially when everything feels meaningless, and so many fall into despair. They ask, why bother? Why love? Why work? Why dream? If nothing lasts, if everything ends, if truth is illusion, then what is the point? This is the existential crisis of knowing, because knowledge alone cannot save us. Facts cannot fill the void. Reason cannot answer the question that haunts us all. What should I do with my life? Now let's step back and look at the metaphor we introduced earlier. Chasing shadows in a hall of mirrors. You walk through the maze, seeing reflections of yourself everywhere. Each mirror shows a different version. One makes you taller, another makes you smaller. One twists your face, another reflects you backward. You try to touch them, to find the real one, but every time you move, the reflections shift. There is no center, no fixed point, no escape. This is what it feels like to search for truth in a world where everything is interpretation, where meaning is fluid, where certainty is always just beyond reach. And yet, even in this endless maze, we keep walking, we keep looking, we keep asking, because perhaps the search itself is the point. Perhaps the act of questioning is what keeps us alive. Maybe truth doesn't have to be solid to matter. Maybe meaning doesn't have to be universal to be real. Maybe values don't have to be absolute to guide us. Perhaps truth is not a thing you possess. Perhaps it is a path you walk, a way of being, a lens through which you choose to see the world. And if that is true, then maybe we are not lost. Maybe we are simply choosing what to believe, choosing how to live, choosing what to care about. And in that choice, we find freedom, even in a world without fixed meaning, even in a universe that offers no answers, even in the silence between stars. Now let's consider what this means for the way we live. If truth is constructed, then how do we navigate a world filled with competing narratives? How do we make decisions when no path seems objectively better than another? How do we relate to others when their truths feel alien to ours? This is where wisdom begins, not in certainty, but in humility, in recognizing that none of us has the full picture, that every story we tell is incomplete, that every belief we hold may one day shift, and that is okay, because growth requires doubt, understanding requires curiosity, connection requires openness, and meaning requires creation. You are not given meaning, you build it, moment by moment, choice by choice, word by word, love by love. And if you stop waiting for the universe to give you purpose, if you stop chasing shadows in the hall of mirrors and instead turn toward what matters to you, then perhaps the absurdity of truth becomes not a burden, but a gift, because now you are free. Free to write your own story, free to shape your own world, free to choose what is true for you. And in that freedom, you find peace, even in uncertainty, even in doubt, even in the unknown. If truth doesn't exist, then what remains? Only wonder, only mystery, only the question. And that brings us to our final segment. So take a breath, let the rhythm of thought slow around you, and prepare to explore the last great mystery of all. Are we alone in the universe? Look up at the stars. If you can't see them right now, imagine them, each one a sun, each sun surrounded by planets, billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, an almost infinite number of possibilities. And somewhere out there, someone else may be looking back. Someone may be wondering the same thing you are. Are we alone? It's a question that has haunted humanity for as long as we've looked to the sky. We build telescopes powerful enough to peer across time itself. We send signals into the void, hoping someone will answer. We search for signs of life, not just microbial, but intelligent. Yet so far, all we have found is silence, deep, vast, echoing silence. And that brings us to one of the most unsettling paradoxes in science, the Fermi paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, who once asked, simply and profoundly, where is everybody? Given the sheer size of the universe, the age of its stars, and the likelihood that many of them host planets capable of supporting life, it seems statistically inevitable that intelligent civilizations should exist elsewhere. So why haven't we seen any sign of them? Why no messages, no spacecraft, no ruins, no echoes of ancient voices? This is the paradox, and it opens a door to questions that stretch beyond science and deep into philosophy, fear, and wonder. Let's begin with the numbers. In 1961, astronomer Frank Drake developed an equation to estimate the number of active, communicative, extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. It looks like this: n equals r star times f sub p times n sub e times f sub l times f sub I times f sub c times l. Now let me break that down in simple terms. N is the number of civilizations in our galaxy with which communication might be possible. R star is the rate of star formation per year in our galaxy. F sub p is the fraction of those stars that have planetary systems. And sub E is the average number of planets per star that could potentially support life. F sub L is the fraction of those planets where life actually emerges. F sub I is the fraction of life bearing planets where intelligent life evolves. F sub C is the fraction of civilizations that develop technology that releases detectable signs of their existence into space. And finally, L is the length of time such civilizations release detectable signals. Even with conservative estimates, the result suggests there should be dozens, if not hundreds, of intelligent civilizations in our galaxy alone. Multiply that by the 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, and the conclusion is staggering. We should not be alone, and yet we are, at least, as far as we know. Now let's explore some possible explanations. One theory is the rare earth hypothesis, which argues that while simple life might be common, complex, intelligent life is extremely rare. It suggests that the conditions that led to life on Earth, stable planetary orbits, plate tectonics, a large moon stabilizing our axis, liquid water, and a protective magnetic field, are so unique that they may not be replicated elsewhere. Even if life arises, intelligence may not follow. Evolution does not favor intelligence inherently, it favors survival. And sometimes, intelligence is a liability. A species becomes too clever for its own good. It consumes resources faster than they can replenish. It builds weapons it cannot control. It alters its environment in ways that lead to collapse. This leads us to another chilling possibility: the Great Filter. The Great Filter is a concept that asks, why don't we see advanced civilizations? Is it because they never arise? Or is it because they destroy themselves before reaching the point where they can communicate across interstellar distances? Perhaps intelligence is a trap, a brief flash of awareness in the darkness, followed by extinction. If that is true, then we may be approaching our own filter. Climate change, nuclear war, artificial intelligence gone rogue, pandemics unleashed by our own laboratories. These are not distant possibilities. They are unfolding around us. And if other civilizations faced similar challenges and failed to overcome them, then perhaps we are not hearing from them because they no longer exist. But maybe the silence is not due to absence. Maybe it's due to distance. Light travels fast, but space is unimaginably vast. Even at the speed of light, it would take over 4 years to reach the nearest star system, 20,000 years to cross the Milky Way, millions to reach nearby galaxies. And what if other civilizations are not broadcasting? What if they are hiding? Some theorists suggest that advanced civilizations may choose to remain silent to avoid attracting attention from potentially hostile species. After all, if history teaches us anything, it's that when a more advanced civilization encounters a less advanced one, the results are rarely peaceful. What if other intelligences have learned this lesson well? What if they see us as we are now, broadcasting our presence into the void without fully understanding the consequences, and decide not to respond? What if they are watching, waiting, observing, like scientists observing ants in a colony? Unseen, unreachable. Another possibility is that we are simply looking in the wrong way. Our search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, relies largely on detecting radio waves or optical signals. But what if advanced civilizations communicate using methods we can't even conceive? Quantum entanglement, gravitational waves, direct manipulation of space-time. Or perhaps they no longer use physical bodies at all. Perhaps they have transcended biology entirely, uploading their consciousness into machines, existing as pure information in digital realms. From our perspective, they wouldn't appear as life at all. They would be ghosts in the machine, undetectable by our current instruments. Or worse, they may have become so alien that we wouldn't recognize them even if we saw them. Their minds shaped by evolution on worlds so different from ours that their thoughts operate on principles we can't comprehend. Their senses tuned to wavelengths we can't perceive. Their values incomprehensible. Their motives unknowable. This is the ultimate mystery, not whether we are alone, but what it means if we are or if we aren't, because both possibilities are equally terrifying. If we are truly alone, then the burden of existence falls entirely on us. We are the only minds in the cosmos, the only ones asking questions, the only ones dreaming. That is a profound responsibility, and also a kind of loneliness that stretches beyond comprehension. But if we are not alone, then what? Will we find friends or enemies? Will we find beings so advanced they seem like gods, or so primitive they barely register? And what if they were here already? What if ancient visitors once passed through our solar system, studied us briefly, and moved on, leaving no trace we could recognize? What if we are not the first, only the latest? And someday, long after we are gone, another species will ask the same question we do now, looking down at the ruins of Earth, wondering who we were and why we vanished. So, what does all this mean for us? For you, lying here, listening to these thoughts drift through your mind? It means that we live in a universe of infinite possibility, of endless wonder, of terrifying silence. And yet, despite all the unknowns, we still look up, we still wonder, we still dream, because that is what conscious beings do. We seek meaning, we create stories, we reach beyond ourselves, and even if we are alone, even if we are small, even if we are fleeting, there is still beauty in the asking, still awe in the searching, still love in the sharing, because the act of wondering, truly wondering, is one of the most beautiful things a human being can do. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let these spirals echo in your mind. Let the stars hold you. Let the silence comfort you. Let the questions remain unanswered, not because they must be solved, but because they remind us that we are alive, curious, awake, and part of something vast, something mysterious, something worth exploring. Good night, sweet dreams. May your thoughts wander gently among the stars.